Answer me when I call to you, O God of my righteousness. You who have relieved me in my distress, have mercy on me and hear my prayer. Welcome to Daily Prayer, your moment to breathe, reflect, and reconnect with God. In Psalm 4, David finds himself surrounded by people who have turned away from God, people whose hearts are hardened and whose lives are filled with lies and vanity. He begins by calling out to God, the one who is his righteousness and his refuge. David is in distress, but even in his darkest moments, he knows where to turn. To God. Have you ever felt alone in your struggles, surrounded by people who don't understand, who don't care, or who actively oppose what you believe? David knew that feeling well. He was surrounded by powerful, influential people who lived in pride and falsehood, and yet he didn't lose hope. He knew that no matter how many people were against him, God was on his side, and this confidence in God's faithfulness allowed him to turn to God in his distress. David begins by asking God to hear his prayer. He calls out to the God of righteousness, the one who lifts him up when he's in trouble. David knows that only God can bring him the relief he needs. In times of trouble, it's easy to turn inward, to become bitter or resentful. But David's example teaches us to turn outward, to seek God's mercy and intervention. We too can call on God for help when we are surrounded by those who mock our faith or live in ways that oppose God as truth. David's prayer shows his deep trust in God's ability to lift him up. He says, "You who have relieved me in my distress." David knew that God had been faithful in the past, lifting him up from previous trials. And because of God's faithfulness, David had confidence that God would hear him again. This is the foundation of David's faith. God has been faithful before, and he will be faithful again. In the same way, we can draw strength from remembering the times when God has delivered us. When we face new challenges, we can remind ourselves of God's past faithfulness, knowing that he will be there for us again. How long, O you sons of men, will you turn my glory to shame? How long will you love worthlessness and seek falsehood? David's lament continues as he calls out to the powerful figures around him. These sons of men, the influential and the mighty, are those who oppose him. They mock his faith and live in a way that dishonors God. David is calling them to account for their actions, asking how long they will persist in their arrogance, how long they will continue to live in pride and deceit. David's words are not just for those who oppose him, but for all who live without regard for God's truth. How often do we see people, whether in our communities, our workplaces, or even in our own families, who turn their backs on God, choosing falsehood and vanity over truth? How long will they remain in their rebellion? David's frustration is palpable. He sees the injustice of the world, where those who live in pride and deceit often seem to prosper, while the righteous are persecuted. But in his frustration, David doesn't lose sight of the truth. He understands that God sees all things, and although it may seem like the wicked are winning, David knows that the time will come when God will judge them. This is a reminder for us today. In a world where sin and falsehood often appear to reign, we are called to trust in God's justice. It is easy to become discouraged when we see the wicked prosper, when we see lies spread without consequence. But David's prayer teaches us to keep our eyes fixed on God. He is the righteous judge, and in his time, he will make all things right. David's words also call us to examine our own hearts. Are we guilty of living in falsehood, of pursuing things that are empty or vain? The world constantly tempts us with distractions, money, status, power, fame, things that may seem valuable but are ultimately hollow. The question we must ask ourselves is, do we seek what is eternal, or do we love worthlessness? In moments of doubt, it is easy to get swept up in the world's values, to chase after things that don't last. But David reminds us that those who seek God's truth will find true fulfillment. God's ways are far greater than the fleeting pleasures of the world. His truth brings peace, joy, and life in abundance, while the pursuit of falsehood leaves us empty. David continues, "But know that the Lord has set apart for himself him who is godly. The Lord will hear when I call to him." Here, David reassures himself, us, that God is not indifferent to the plight of the righteous. Though it may seem like the wicked have the upper hand, God has set apart those who are godly. He hears their cries, and he will act on their behalf. The godly are not forgotten, and their cries do not go unheard. David draws comfort from the fact that God hears him. This assurance comes not from David's own strength or ability, but from God's faithfulness. David's confidence is not in himself, but in God as promised to hear and protect those who seek him. And in this, David finds peace. We, too, can find comfort in knowing that God hears our cries. When we face injustice, when we are misunderstood or persecuted, we can be assured that God is listening. He sees the righteous, and he will answer them in his perfect timing. In the midst of our struggles, we can rest in the truth that we are not alone. God is with us. He hears us, and he will deliver us. David continues by saying, "Tremble and do not sin. Meditate within your heart on your bed and be still." This is a powerful call to self-reflection and repentance. When we are faced with injustice, it's easy to respond with anger or bitterness. But David encourages us to pause, to meditate on our hearts, and to be still. Instead of reacting impulsively, we are called to reflect, to seek God's guidance, and to examine our own lives. In times of trouble, we must not let our hearts become hardened. We must guard ourselves against bitterness, anger, and sin. Instead, we are called to meditate on God's truth, to allow his peace to fill our hearts, and to respond with humility and trust. David's words also remind us of the importance of quiet moments with God. In the midst of chaos, we must take time to reflect, to pray, and to listen to his voice. It is in these quiet moments that we find the strength to endure, the wisdom to act, and the peace to navigate life's challenges. Offer the sacrifices of righteousness and put your trust in the Lord. David's prayer takes a turn here as he speaks of offering the sacrifices of righteousness. These sacrifices are not about outward rituals or religious acts, but about living a life of integrity, justice, and obedience to God. In the face of the world's wickedness, David urges us to choose righteousness not just in our actions, but in the posture of our hearts. To offer the sacrifices of righteousness means to give God the best of ourselves, to live in a way that reflects his holiness, and to trust in his ways even when the world around us does not. In a world where it often feels like doing the right thing is costly or unpopular, David's words challenge us to remain faithful. The temptation to compromise, to take shortcuts, or to seek the approval of others is real, but David calls us to live differently. We are called to live in a way that honors God even when others are not. When the world seeks falsehood and vanity, we are called to seek truth, justice, and righteousness. Offering sacrifices of righteousness also means putting our trust in the Lord. Trusting God doesn't always mean that things will go the way we want. It doesn't mean that life will be easy or that we will be free from hardship. But trusting God means that we believe he is good, that A is Hust, and that he will work all things for our good. When we trust in God, we are surrendering our lives to him, believing that he will guide us, protect us, and provide for us. David continues with a question that many of us face in times of trouble. There are many who say, "Who will show us any good?" In the midst of difficulty, it's easy to question whether things will ever get better. When the world feels dark, when it seems like the wicked prosper and the righteous suffer, we can become discouraged. We may ask, who will show us any good? Where is the hope? Where is the goodness in the world? But David's response is one of faith and hope. He says, "Lord, lift up the light of your countenance upon us." David knows that true goodness comes from God alone. He calls on God to shine his light upon him, to reveal his goodness and blessing. In the darkness of the world, we can be assured that God's light is always shining. He is the source of all that is good, and his light guides us through the darkness. When we feel overwhelmed by the darkness, we can pray as David did, asking God to lift up the light of his face upon us. This is a powerful reminder that the goodness we seek cannot be found in the things of the world. True goodness comes from God alone. When we feel discouraged, when we wonder where the goodness is in the world, we must turn our eyes to God. His goodness is unchanging, and his light is always available to us. David continues, "You have put gladness in my heart, more than in the season that their grain and wine increased." Here, David reflects on the joy that comes from knowing God. While the world may seek after material prosperity and pleasure, David knows that true joy comes from a relationship with God. In a time of harvest, when the fields are full of grain and wine, the people of the world may rejoice in their material wealth. But David's joy is deeper. His joy comes from knowing that God is with him, that God is his protector, and that God's goodness is abundant in his life. This is a profound truth for us today. The world offers many things that promise happiness, wealth, fame, but none of these can compare to the joy that comes from knowing and trusting in God. In times of trouble, we may not have the material things the world offers, but we have something far more valuable: the peace and joy that comes from God's presence. David ends this section with a beautiful statement of peace and trust. I will both lie down in peace and sleep. For you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety. Despite the enemies around him, despite the difficulties he faces, David can lie down in peace and sleep because he knows that God is his safety. He is not relying on his own strength or wisdom to protect him. He is trusting in God's protection and provision. When we face trouble, we can take comfort in the same truth. God is our safety. He is the one who watches over us, who keeps us, and who brings us peace. In a world that often feels chaotic, where fear and anxiety can easily take hold, David's words remind us that we can rest in God's care. We don't have to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. God is our refuge, and he is faithful to protect us. In the final verses of Psalm 4, David concludes with a profound sense of peace and security. In peace I will both lie down and sleep. For you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety. David's confidence in God's protection is absolute. Despite the chaos surrounding him, despite the wickedness and deceit in the world, he has peace because he knows that God is his protector. In the midst of danger and unrest, David can sleep, knowing that God is the one who makes him dwell in safety. This is a peace that transcends understanding, a peace that only comes from trusting in the Lord. How often do we allow fear and anxiety to keep us awake at night? When the world feels uncertain, when we face challenges and battles, it can be hard to rest. But David's prayer reminds us that when we place our trust in God, we can have peace even in the most difficult circumstances. God is our safety. He is the one who guards our hearts and minds, and he is the one who grants us the peace we long for. David's trust in God was not based on his circumstances, but on his relationship with God. He didn't need to rely on his own strength or resources to find peace. His peace came from knowing that God was with him and that God was in control. When we trust in God, we can rest, knowing that he is watching over us, protecting us, and guiding us. David's words also remind us of the importance of trusting God in the midst of our trials. When we face opposition, when we are surrounded by those who do not understand or who oppose our faith, we can take comfort in knowing that God is our refuge. His presence brings peace, and his protection brings security. No matter what the world throws at us, we can rest in the assurance that God is with us, and he will never leave us or forsake us. David began this psalm in distress, calling out to God for help. But he ends it in peace, knowing that God has heard his prayer and will protect him. This is the journey of faith, from distress to peace, from fear to confidence, from struggle to victory. When we call on God, he hears us, he answers us, and he brings us the peace that only he can give. In conclusion, Psalm 4 teaches us the power of trust and dependence on God. It reminds us that even in the face of opposition and difficulty, God is our refuge and strength. When we seek him, he will hear our prayers and provide for us. We can rest in his peace, knowing that he is with us in every situation.